Oh, everyone, happy new year. I'm so happy. So happy. I'm so happy. Not yet, not this yet. I'm so happy. Hey, happy new year, you guys. Welcome to 2022. This audio should be perfect. Mwah. I can hear it perfect. No echo. I took a few minutes and got everything right. I'm happy I cracked a beer for good luck. I found one last New Year's beer, a Suyo Bino Neko. Let me show you. I got a little light on it. It means, basically, it just means Wednesday Cat. If you haven't heard me talking about it before, it's one of my favorite craft beers here. And it brought me good luck because I was able to get the audio and video settings done perfectly, exactly the way I need it done. I kind of half remembered how to do everything, so yeah, I just gotta remember to do this shit next time. but but yeah, we're gonna do something really really cool. Not cool. I don't know if it's cool, but we're gonna go deep into economics for this bonus content. I kind of talked about it, the desire to go over this a bit before, but again, my bad over the holidays, you guys. I completely lied to you guys, like saying that I would do several videos over the break, but I was a lot busier than I thought I would be, and the holiday was a lot longer than I thought it would be. So, yeah, sorry. I just started work again today, and I'm gonna record back to back short bonus contents just to try and make up for it. Uh, Also, shout out to the new and of course old school subscribers on YouTube on the podcast form. YouTube algorithm is kind of start hit the blinds. YouTube's algorithm is starting to swing in my favor, if you will. I kind of know why now. I think I have an idea why. Again, I'm kind of streamlining my content a little bit more, doing a bit more reviews. Again, thanks again. The audio, whatchamacallit, OBS software is really helping out with that, allowing me to do reviews, which I think is one thing. Also, I realize it's just I'll just give you guys a little tip or whatever. I had Japanese, for my other content. I had a YouTube channel for Japanese people that I had up with some 2D animated stuff and things like that. That I was just playing around with, trying to get a feel for what I wanted to do on that front. But again, if you remember last year, I think I said it kind of became a little bit too much for me, so I had to shut it down. But I didn't realize that from the beginning, I used the same email address for that website as I did for this one, and so what I believe was going on was basically YouTube was like, oh, well, if the Japanese people love that shit, they definitely love this shit. So people who were Japanese people were basically seeing me talking shit like I do to you guys, online. And they were just like, what the fuck is this? And just clicking off of it immediately. Actually, one of my students kind of made me aware of it. I was like, oh, yeah, I saw you on the sofa drinking and talking crazy. And I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, this is not for you guys. Mm. So I had to actually just shut that page down. And after I did, I noticed an almost immediate uptick in my number of views, my number of subscribers, just my numbers all around are slowly starting to tick up. So thank you for your new subscribers. Thank you, algorithm, for showing my shit to people. And I think that's really what's going on. So I'm kind of happy about that. I didn't really dumbfound the algorithm like I was doing before. So yeah, so new people on YouTube, welcome again. People who've been around for a while, welcome back. We're in for another year of great content. Again, it might be bi-weekly for the next several months. I'm not gonna lie, several months to. You never know. We might even push that to 6 months. You never know. Again, pretty soon I'll kind of explain what's going on, but yeah, something's a brewing. I mean, nothing bad. Everything's good, but just to let you know. So yeah. Okay, let's get into the topic that we have for today because it's a video by the Wall Street Journal that I had seen in December, and I wanted to talk about it, but I kind of let it percolate again, just because schedule wise and things like that. But we're in a new year, and I kind of want to just talk about it. We're gonna get economicsy, and I'm gonna give you my theories. Good thing I got a beer, so mm, But again, I'm not an expert. I'm just dude teaching English, talking shit on YouTube in my fucking pajamas, like that you see almost all the time. So please, okay, okay. Like every time I'm in these same fucking pajamas, damn near. Although my wife got me some really nice Uniqlo ones, comfortable light ones for Christmas, so you'll be seeing those soon too. Trust me. Okay, but let's get into it. So, it's Japanification as you. What's the title of this fucking thing? It's something from the Wall Street Journal. Again, the link is going to be in the profile. I just don't feel like reading the whole title, but it's just a Wall Street Journal mini doc by a dude. Okay, first impressions about this dude. I don't know who he is, but he doesn't strike me as someone who lives in Japan long term, or he's like an expat, maybe just from America, got stationed in Tokyo for a few years, but doesn't really get it. He just kind of seems like aloof a little bit. I mean, just the Japanese that he uses, the way he goes about the sites that he visits is just kind of touristy. Whatever. We'll see. Let me stop talking shit about this before I get into it, and I'll just kind of stop along the way and give my 2 cents on it. So here we go.
Big Mac.
Stopping by McDonald's for lunch.
Shit, here we go.
Whether you're buying a ticket for the subway,
Big Mac.
stopping by McDonald's for lunch, or shopping for a computer. The prices of these things don't change much in Japan, but in the US they're going up, and inflation hit a 3-decade high in October.
Now, of course, inflation, of course, has been well documented all over the place, even though I keep track of this shit a lot, and I'm not going to get all wild and conspiratorial, but I do clearly remember, like, this time last year, the experts were kind of telling you that there wasn't going to be any inflation from all the money printing that was going on. Then it became transitory, and then now it's like, hey, guess what, you guys? Inflation's here. And at the end of the reason why I'm doing this is because I heard it reported from other people that I follow, and I noticed it myself, that the narrative kind of shifted from like there is no inflation to there's transitory inflation to there's inflation, but inflation's good for you. It's kind of towards the end of the year it has been pushed. Now, I don't really know where that shit's coming from, and I don't really know if it will continue, but I found it strange because I clearly, I'm kind of a geek about this shit, so I clearly remember a year ago when I was like trying to tell people, inflation's coming, and people who are like-minded experts that I listen to were like, yeah, inflation's coming, and people on mainstream media were like, get the fuck out of here. And then I reported it to my family. It was a regular discussion, like, just wait 6 more months. It remains to be seen how intense or they might kind of dip for a while or whatever. We'll see what happens in the next several months, but I don't think that shit's going away anytime soon. But now this is kind of smells a little bit like a fluff piece, if you will, about how good inflation is. So that's why I kind of wanted to bring my insight onto it, especially since he's using Japan as a test case for it. All right, let's keep going.
Japan, inflation is about 0, and has been that way for nearly 30 years. In fact, there have been periods when prices were actually falling, deflation.
So we went shopping around Tokyo to see how low prices that may seem great for our wallets could actually be one sign of a less dynamic and slow-growing economy.
Now, this is where, I got to give my version of Japanese history, how it has been reported to me and how I've witnessed it. Because I did come to Japan, again, in 2004, and before Abenomics, which was former Prime Minister Abe's, bold plan of basically quantitative easing, a bunch of money printing to jumpstart the Japanese economy and boost it out of inflation, which it had been in up to that point for over 20 years. Now, I'm sure you might, if you're familiar with Japan, you might be familiar with the bubble economy area, which lasted in the 80s and popped around, I think, 1990, which is basically a period of extreme economic expansion. If you remember the 80s, Japan was just taking over everything, not only pop culture, electronics, but just also economic power, and domestically. Apparently, I wasn't around for it, but apparently that led to massive speculation, and of course, the stock market, real estate market, whatever. Easy money goes where it goes, right? Goes in. I heard someone say money looks for a home, and so easy money kind of looked for a home, and they found it in those places. Now, I believe what happened, again, this is off the top of my head. I haven't done any research, just from what I researched, heard, and can kind of remember off the top of my head. I believe, that in the late 80s, the bubble economy and the stock market of Japan came crashing down due to the decision to raise interest rates to kind of slow down the speculation. And what happened was, of course, you raise interest rates, it kind of throws a wrench into the wheelhouse of the economy on purpose, but it caused maybe it was done too fast. I don't really know. I can't say, but it caused a huge downturn. Just look at the Japanese stock market historical chart, and you'll see when it happened. I believe it was like end of December 1989, 1990, some shit like that. Now, then we entered Japan entered what was called the Lost Decade, where for about 10 plus years, and extended to the next decade as well when I came to Japan, where the Japanese economy was seen as flat, basically on life support. Now, what this dude and what, documentaries like this fail to explain is that the Japanese economy was never, even though the economy crashed, it was never allowed to flush out all that kind of bad money and created what's called zombie banks. I believe the term zombie bank came from the Japanese economy because, even though there were a lot of bankruptcies and consolidations and things like that, the market was not allowed to fully crash and flush out all that bad money. And interest rates, I believe, were dropped back to zero at some point. And if I remember correctly, quantitative easing was begun maybe in the 90s or the 2000s. I forgot exactly when. Basically, just like what the central governments are doing right now, keeping kind of industries alive. But because Japan is a more conservative economy, this is only my opinion, because they're a conservative economy, that the desire for growth and expansion in many businesses wasn't there, especially because they'd been through such a traumatic event in the 80s. They just wanted to keep things rolling forward. So it still continues to this day. Many industries, businesses, with corporations are being kept alive through, government intervention, government basically a lifeline to easy money, hence zombie banks, zombie industries. That's, for me personally, from my observations and what I hear, is the underlying reason why Japan's economy has remained flat and deflationary for such a long time. And that's something that this dude is not going to cover at all in this fucking mini documentary. Just saying. So what I mean by that is that you can't make an apples to apples comparison between what's going on in the rest of the world and what's been going on in Japan over the past 20 to fucking 30 years, because they're two completely different things. And I'll get to why even what's going on in Japan is changing quite a bit from now. All right, but again, I'll keep rambling on about this shit. Sorry, this is what I love talking about, so sorry.
If you want to buy electronics in Tokyo, this is the place to be. And coming to Akihabara is also a good place to compare prices with the U.S. and see how Japan is dealing with inflationary pressures differently.
Now, okay, he talks about...
In the U.S., the price of computers jumped 8% in the month of October compared to a year earlier, whereas in Japan, prices of these notebook computers actually fell a little more than 1%.
And one of the reasons for that big difference is demand.
Yeah, but he's talking about increased demand, right? But one thing he doesn't... let me watch a little bit more before I go fucking tear into this guy.
As the U.S. has begun to recover, at least economically, from the pandemic, there's been an upsurge of demand. The U.S. has seen a lot of supply chain pressures, including shortages of parts and materials like semiconductors that go into so many products, including electronics. And
Okay, I'm gonna stop there because he starts going into supply chain shit, and this is another thing I've heard, like, spewed out. It's like a lie. Hey, supply chain, supply chain, supply chain. But he gave like that again. Tried to give an apples to apples comparison. Well, Japan's deflation, only gone down, and America's gone up. But there's a huge difference in the amount of economic stimulus that's been given to America compared to Japan. It's just like night and day. Even I mean, I'm a citizen of both. I received a stimulus check from America. Um, you know what I mean. But like, it's the amount is completely different, right? First off, and the mindset of the citizens is completely different as well. Like, Americans are consumers, right? Like, that's the engine that drives the American economy is consumption, overconsumption, hyperconsumption. If you want to be for real with it, America's the credit card of the world. Like, let's be real with it. Japanese people are not like that, right? Part of it, I think, is leftover residuals from the bubble economy, and you kind of see that the generations that pass that are not like that, right? And so, and even like the speculation that occurred in the bubble economy, it gets talked about, but from what I heard, it wasn't really, everyone in Japan wasn't really participating in it like that. It's kind of like Wall Street, like, before the Lehman collapse or whatever. Wall Street was having a party, but the rest of the economy was just kind of plugging along. Yeah, people were doing pretty well, but it wasn't like the opulence in the party time like it was like in certain areas. But that was just a loud kind of voice that you heard. And some people have kind of told me it's kind of similar thing in Japan. Like, everybody wasn't like waving 10,000 yen bills to hail a taxi. It was just, those are some of the anecdotal things you hear because it's such a like an outlandish kind of attention getting thing. But back to like electronics and things like that in Japan. Yeah. Also, like, for example, remember, Americans live way beyond their means. So if you give an American like not everybody, but let's just keep it real, people. Let's just keep it real. You give them average American person a check for a couple $1,000s. They going to buy a TV. Japanese people, generally speaking, are going to save that money, right? Like, there might be some consumption, but it's nowhere near the amount of consumption it is in Japan, because in America. Because for me personally, Japanese people, and me, I've become that way as well, live a lot more minimalist, kind of Spartan type lifestyle than Americans do. Americans very much, and this is not to just shit on Americans, but I'm just saying, like, if you're American, if you know an American, if you've lived in America, what I'm saying is true, right? Like, generally speaking, of course, like, Americans live far beyond their means, and what is it? Consumption has very much become ingrained part of like the American lifestyle. Living the American dream is like getting it now. And so if you give a bunch of Americans free money, that shit goes everywhere instantly. Japan, not so much, right? And so Japanese people, even if they might have like less of income, their savings rate is a lot higher than it is in America. And also because, for example, up until recently, especially banking, because I don't know how the fuck they do it, but interest rates are so low. Banking fees also are extremely low as well. So it's not really costing you anything to park your money in a bank up until recently. And, because everything was so deflationary, that's what happens. There's no rush to kind of spend the money like that. Like the velocity of money was very slow until recently, and the government's been trying to pump money into the economy to create inflation to speed it up, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But let's keep watching what this dude says.
Also, container ships have been blocked at ports such as Los Angeles and Long Beach, so they're backed up, and that means a shortage, and in some cases it means retailers feel that they can or must raise prices. Japan faces many of the same supply chain problems as the US does, but in general, it has not resulted in price increases in Japan. One reason is that consumer demand in general is not so strong in Japan and hasn't been, and that's part of the inflation story, that Japan has never really experienced what we see in the US right now.
I don't know if that's true. It's never. I mean, again, you go back to the 80s or things like that. Again, that's why I believe this guy doesn't live in Japan. He just read a couple of notes or whatever, and did a couple of Wikipedia searches. But go back and look at well, I can't say if the inflation that was experienced is across the board, but again, it was like good inflation, quote unquote, at that time. So I don't know.
But companies in the U.S. found it hard to meet that higher consumer demand because they aren't able to find enough workers. So that's driving them to boost salaries to recruit workers, and the cost then is passed on as higher prices. And you can see that happening on a menu at McDonald's.
This is another important part too. That the labor market. You've heard me talk about like the Seishin system in the past, regular employees and non-regular employees as well. That system is also changing in Japan as well. And right now there's kind of an initiative by the government to help raise salaries, which I'm like, okay, whatever, because raising salaries just. You heard, he just said what happened like when salaries were higher in America, like high. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not like saying like keep salaries low and stuff like that, but politicians have been kind of doing this little magic act where they're like, oh, if we raise prices, everyone's richer. If you raise prices, that leads to higher prices. If you raise wages, that leads to higher prices that the employees have to pay. So, I'm a firm believer, if you can't tell, like I'm kind of more in the Austrian economic school of thinking, and I believe that sound central banking, or even the elimination of central banking, if you will, but sound money, I'm believing a sound money policy trickles down to the rest of the economy, right? But when you have kind of behind the scenes, like central bankers and people who have their finger on the tap of money, like playing all these funny money games that people don't really know what's going on, like the value of the money that they're getting, they perceive it a different way than actually what's happening, which is why I would encourage you, especially to this year, if you have some time, if you don't know where money comes from, you don't know how central banking works, you don't know what a fiat currency is, you don't know like a lot of these things. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I would really, really, really encourage you to educate yourself on what's going on behind the scenes as far as monetary policy. It might shock you to realize that I think like if you look at the M1 money supply okay, I'm going way too deep now, but sorry. If you look at, I believe it's the M1 money supply, like what is the M money supply? Use YouTube, use Google, like of the Federal Reserve. You can pull it up and you can see. I believe off the top of my head, it's 35 to 40% of all of the dollars in existence were created in the past couple of years, like that ever existed. It blew my mind, like 40%, 30, 40%, well over 30%. I believe, let's just say a third of the dollars ever created by central banks were created in the past 2 years. That tells you something. And, anyone who's telling you like that's not going to lead to any like ramifications and reverberating throughout the economy for the global reserve currency, they just fucking selling you some fucking pipe dreams. That's all I got to say about that. But anyway, I digress. Back to McDonald's.
Big Mac はこちらですね. Here in Tokyo, a Big Mac was the equivalent of about $3.40. In the U.S., they're actually raising prices at McDonald's, and according to the company, that's largely because of wage increases.
McDonald's said wages have gone up at least 10% so far this year at U.S. restaurants.
And 10% is a recurring theme because, okay, he talks about it later. I'm not going to cut this dude off.
The survey finds that companies in the U.S. are setting aside an average 3.9% of total payroll for wage increases next year, the most since 2008. In Japan, we just haven't seen that wage price cycle develop. One reason that wages tend to rise more slowly in Japan is because of a more rigid labor force. People are staying at companies for a very long time, and they really don't have the flexibility to switch jobs without great personal loss. So companies are not really under pressure to offer these people wage increases.
I agree with that, right? It is quite, again, unionization from my, besides like factories and things like that, isn't really as big. Well, no, there are unions, but I don't know. Okay, let me take that back. Yeah, I would say again, there really hasn't been much of a need until recently, until this current situation that we're in Japan to push for higher wages in many sectors, unlike in America, because I mean, Japan's economy has been kind of flat, if not deflationary, but I believe that's all going to change. And I believe like the real hard line push for it to change it is really, really coming really, really soon. Like this next year and a half in the Japanese economy, in my opinion, again, I've been wrong before. I'm not a fucking economist, but I think we're going, people's image of what, how the Japanese economy works is going to change quite a bit in the next like year to 18 months. We'll see.
Because wages don't go up here, people aren't willing to open up their wallets. One survey by the Bank of Japan found that about half of people think of price first when making a purchase, and they tend to reject any retailer that raises prices.
And he's going to go into this now, but this is a thing that has been a traditional view. But what ends up happening is, and what has been happening first, I've been watching on Japanese news like for the past like quarter, 4 months. Yeah, businesses have been holding back on increasing their prices, because of this traditional fear. But now that we've kind of had a shift in the atmosphere or the thinking of the populace, industries are basically, and not only that, like they just have no choice. They're being squeezed by inflation from abroad for raw materials, from import, whatever, shipping costs. Like we've heard, they have no choice but to start increasing wages. So, and not increasing wages, increasing their prices. So first they started with shrinkflation, which is decreasing the size of the packages and things like that, and they did that as much as they could. Now like price increases have started, I think, in the past few months, with some staple foods like soy sauce, what is it, noodles, coffee, of course, big things like that. But generally what's happened abroad is, what they're going to find out, which I'm pretty sure they're going to find out, is that you know the mindset of the consumer has changed to accept inflation, so that once they realize, like, once it's like one of those things, who goes first. Once one business goes forward and they do it and it's fine, then the next one goes and the next one goes and the next one goes. Next thing you know, this kind of steamroller starts going forward, and here comes the inflation train. Come on, ride the train and ride it, choo choo. That's what I think is coming. Like, we've already passed that watershed moment where companies aren't really hesitant to raise prices anymore. So now they've all been kind of, and what I've seen, it's all been like 10-15% across the board, and then they'll stop, take a look around, because they're very incremental here. They're not just going to jack the price up, because also contrary to like America, where big companies have power over government. In Japan, government generally has power over and control over big companies, so they also have to kind of be wary of government and criticism, and of course from the people as well. But once they realize that they kind of aren't taking any heat, and it's too many of them, the need, of course they've been complaining for the past year, so they've been sucking it up. Hey, go for it. That's why the government, in my opinion, is really trying to say, well, hey, we're raising wages and things like that, to kind of give companies some cover for raising prices. But again, it's just like a cycle of inflation. So I don't know what the fuck this dude's talking about.
Companies have found they're better off keeping their prices level. So, for example, train ticket prices in Japan haven't gone up that much for the last 30 years.
I agree with that.
Whereas in the U.S., the minimum fare on the New York subway has more than doubled over the same period.
Yeah, but the American subway is shit. I'm so sorry. Like, every subway system in America is shit. Even I'm from Washington, D.C., which has one of the best, quote unquote, best subway systems in America, but like it's still shit compared to like Japan. So, and in America, generally speaking, it was outside of New York. I forgot if you just said New York, but outside of in New York, subway system is like 100-something years old. This infrastructure is crumbling. Like the tunnels are leaking and shit anyway. So I would imagine they have to keep jacking up prices to, like, put some fucking band-aids on that shit. But Japan, on the other hand, like Tokyo metropolitan area, like lives and bleeds by the subway system. So it's not just like, it's kind of an apple to oranges type of argument, because besides besides New York City, again, I can't remember if he said New York City, but even if you do take New York City, it's so old that the amount of amount and cost of maintenance for such a crumbling system has to be like exponentially skyrocketing. But because besides this situation where there was an extreme drop in the number of passengers, there's a steady stream of income, actually a rising stream of income, as more over the past decades, more and more people flooded into major cities. So the opposite is true, I would say, for rural area train companies. Those are the ones that have been suffering the most. And again, the inability to raise prices, I think, does apply to those companies, but not in the fucking Tokyo area. But again, I can't remember exactly what cities or countries he used. So whatever. Come on. Oh yeah. Here we go.
Besides train tickets,
he definitely doesn't live in Tokyo.
Flat
he
prices
put that ticket
really
in.
all across the economy. For example, Aeon, which is one of Japan's biggest retailers, putting signs in its stores saying "prices frozen!" exclamation point, at least until the end of the year.
Prices that don't change
until
very
they-
much can be reflective of a society that doesn't change very much. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your perspective.
Japan is still a pretty vibrant place. It's a state.
But see, you can't make that apples to oranges comparison either, because Japan is like over 95% Japanese people, but the West, like again, America is like a complete, mixture of different cultures, different people, different like landscapes and things like that. So it does, like generally speaking, Japanese people move together in unison. America is completely the opposite. So you can't really say that. What the fuck is this dude talking
Stable
about?
society. It has kept its unemployment rate low, but it tends to be accompanied by other phenomena that are not so favorable, such as static wages, such as an economy that seems to lack some of the dynamism of the U.S., where you have a new company like Tesla storming onto the scene and seizing a big part of a market like cars.
What the fuck is this dude talking about? Tesla. Okay, I mean, yeah, Tesla, yes, but like, are you trying to compare Tesla to Toyota, or because the market in Japan is a lot smaller, and in the past, like Japan was at the forefront of the electronics market, but the rest of the world has caught up with Japan. So I mean, a lot of the innovation and things like that, the lack of innovation in Japan comes from the fact that that one, the rest of the world is caught up. Two, technology, because technology has kind of become, I forgot the word, but has been spread amongst other countries like Korea, China, things like that. So the Sony Walkman was a huge innovation 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but now, like, for the same price, like for maybe even cheaper price, other countries are able to do that. Also, Japan doesn't really, similar to America, doesn't really produce as much as it used to, nearly as much, because of offshoring and things like that. So yeah, and because of the language barrier and culture barrier and things like that, Japan has been very inwardly focused up until this point. Only now, out of necessity, countries are starting to kind of try to branch out and look abroad for ways of like increasing revenue. But that's out of necessity. But there are still some companies that are thriving domestically, but there's just a cap on what they can do because they're not really focused on the international stage. Tesla, on the other hand, they're just trying to look to sell cars to everybody and anyone. But if you try and compare Tesla to Toyota is like, thriving abroad as well. And that's like more of an apples to apples comparison. Of course, Toyota's been around much longer than Tesla, but, still, like, there are, if you look around, there are companies that you would not know their name abroad, but they're like household names here. So for me, that argument doesn't really hold so much weight because it's more of another apples to oranges kind of comparison. He's just throwing like names and buzzwords like, well, hey, Japan doesn't have a Tesla, but they got a Toyota. So like, who the fuck? I don't know. And America's like big car manufacturers are like have been left in the dust, like, because I don't even get into all that shit.
You can see some of that recently in growth figures. Japan's GDP shrank at an annual pace of 3.6% in the third quarter, whereas in the US the figure was 2.1% growth. Low prices and
GDP growth because of free money. Okay, whatever.
and prices that never go up may sound like a good thing, but they can also reflect larger economic problems in a country.
Again, for me, like this is kind of one of those fluff pieces that makes it sound like, yeah, you need inflation to kind of keep an economy thriving. And again, I just fundamentally disagree with that. In the short term, yes, it's true, but generally speaking, the population suffers the consequences. If you want to talk about Japan's, stagnant economy, in my personal opinion, what we're seeing in Japan's, and what we have been seeing in Japan's stagnant economy, is the residual effects of like speculation, money printing, easy money policy, some of the same policies that were going on right now, and the refusal to kind of flush that money out of the system that has dragged on for the past like 30 plus years. So, if you want to make an apples to apples comparison, you might say that at best the rest of the world is in for a zombie-like economy situation that Japan has been enduring and trying to overcome for the past like 30-something years. And now that politicians are kicking it, purely my speculation, now that politicians are kicking this shit into hyperdrive, I think they're going to get a lot more than they bargained for, because once you open that inflation Pandora's box, who knows what kind of shit's going to start coming out. And you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube, buddy. And they really, really, really trying hard to get that shit out. So I don't know. That's all I got to say about that. Again, sorry, it's been, oh my gosh, it's been 30-something minutes. This is like almost like a full episode. But as you can see, I really do. I don't really talk about heavy shit on the podcast. I'm trying to keep it to myself. But 2022 is coming, and this narrative has been getting pushed a lot in the media, the economics media and things like that. And even if you aren't into economics at all, you think it's boring as shit, for me personally, it's the most interesting thing in the world right now. Has been for the past several years. I used to be really into economics, like about 10 macroeconomics. Let me say that, about like, again, 2009, 2010. A little bit 2011, but I was in like a really dark place. I was just like, the world is ending kind of stuff. But now I'm a bit older, a bit more level-headed, a bit more mature to be able to process the information a better way. But so I would encourage you to do the same thing, because if you don't know, you're going to find out soon enough. So hopefully it helps. Hopefully it sparks at least some kind of curiosity for someone who wasn't interested in economics, macroeconomics before. So. All right, y'all. Let me holler at you next time. Hopefully, I can record one more of these. Holler at you next time. Peace. How do I turn this shit off? Okay, later.